We've been implementing an application that allows us to register new users and then log in existing users. And once they register, log in, they go and view their profile page. And this is fine right now. But what I'd like to be able to do is actually use some real authentication that can store user session information and identify this user across several pages that identify them as an identity, and then perhaps deny them access to certain portions of the application and give them certain privileges if they indeed identify themselves as a correct person. So to do that, we're going to be using a framework that a Node.js framework called PassportJS that was specifically designed for this particular purpose. So first, let's install the packages that implement PassportJS. The first one, the core one, is called just plain old Passport. So we'll say npm install Passport, and we'll save to store into our package.json. Right? The next one we're going to be installing is Passport Local. Passport Local is one of several what are called strategies that allow Passport to interact with various strategies on how to identify someone. We can identify them either through an existing account in Twitter or in Facebook, or local, to a local database. Right now, we'll keep it simple and just keep Passport Local. We're going to also install a couple of other frameworks that allow us to, for instance, parse cookies. Right. So, because we're going to be storing information in the session. And the sessions, the way we identify them as being the same session across many requests is stored. The identification is stored in the cookie. So we're also going to use express session, which is express. Node.js is express implementation of user session storage across several requests. There we go. So we have that. Now notice that now our package is somewhat more right. We have express session. We installed 2 Passport related libraries, right? And we have also cookie parser in there. Very good. So let's go to here, and we'll go to the server and configure those libraries we just loaded. So let's require them. So we'll require each one of them. So Passport will require just Passport. So Passport require Passport. We'll also need to require the local strategy. So we'll create an instance of that as well. So we'll say var local strategy will require the local Passport local library we just created, and in there we want to create an instance strategy, the strategy itself, and we'll also include the cookie. We'll require the cookie parser library, which we loaded earlier, which we called it cookie. And finally, the session from express session, right? So which is require express session. Okay, so now that we have those loaded up, we need to configure them. So let's configure them right here. Once we have configure everything else, we'll configure these 4 things we just loaded. So let's configure the session app. Use the session. Now the way the session is configured is that it needs a what's called a secret that it will use to hash and obfuscate any information that is stored. This is the secret. So this is a key, right, that it uses to hash any information that's stored in a cookie. Since the cookie goes out in the public, anybody can see the cookie when it's stored in the browser. We want to make sure that it's even if it's red, but that it's gibberish information on the client. Right? We can never trust the client. Once we have those instantiated, configured, we need to also configure Passport, and we need to initialize Passport. Initialize. Okay. And then we also need to initialize the session that Passport uses, which is based on the session, on the Express session implementation. So there we go. So now that we've configured it, it's time that we can start start reading the session and verifying that the user that's coming in indeed is who they say they are, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to create here a couple of kind of like interceptors, right? That they're gonna look at the request before anyone else, right? So what we want to do is that we're going to say that Passport. We're going to say use the local strategy, a new instance of the local strategy, okay? And then here we're going to provide. Oh, sorry, no, we're going to provide a function. Sorry, provide a function here that is going to be invoked every time a request comes in, right? And it's going to extract user information, right, such as the username and the password. It's going to be extracted from the cookie. It's going to be serialized and deserialized from the cookie, and then this function is going to be responsible for verifying that this user actually exists. And if it does exist, it's going to notify us through this done object. Okay. Let's see. We have missing something here. I think we're missing an extra parenthesis somewhere. Okay, there we go. So what happens here is that this username and password is going to be extracted from the current cookie that's being shared across the session across several requests. And we're gonna, once we extract it, we can use the user model, which is down. Oh, it's down here. Okay, so we're gonna move this. We need to use this model to actually look up that user. I'm going to say find one. Right? Is there a user that with that with that username and password, username, and that password? Right? If there is one, right? Then we're gonna notify us either with an error or the actual user object, right? And so depending on whether if there was an error, right, or if there was no user, right? So we have those kind of choices, right? So if there's an error, then we're going to notify the strategy that we're going to pass the error to the done method that is being passed to us by the framework, so that we can notify whether the state of the verification or validation. If there was no user, right, if it was null or didn't exist or something went wrong with that user, then also we're gonna say that we failed, right? We're gonna say return done and say that that there is no user, right, and that it failed. Okay? Otherwise, if it's not an error, or if it's if there's an actual user, then we notify the framework by passing that there was no error, right? No error when there was logged in, and that the current user, we found it. There it is. So we pass it to the Passport framework using the done method. Right? Now this username and password information is being extracted from the current cookie where we're storing this information, and to do that we need to serialize and deserialize. We need to tell Passport how is it that we're converting the object, the textual representation from the cookie, back into an actual object, or vice versa. How do we transform a user back to a cookie? To do that, we use the functions serialize, and deserialize. Passport.deserialize. Right? What these functions do, which is serialize things, you serialize user, deserialize user. Here, what we provide here is a function that Passport is going to use to convert between these two worlds. So here's we provide a function where we are providing the framework provides us with an object representation of the user, and we need to notify the framework with a function saying, well, how do you convert this? And for now, we're just going to say that it's basically that user. The user is the serialized version of the user. To deserialize, well, we're going to do something similar, but here we're actually going to look up for the existing user, see if it actually exists in the database. So we're going to be provided with the same user data and the done. And what we're going to do here is look up to see if this user actually exists. So we're going to say user find by ID, and use the ID in the user. There we go. If it's a success, if there's an error, we're going to notify us with an error, or if not, then the actual user in the database, right? So if the user does exist, we will provide the done function with either if there's an error and the user response, right? So there we go. So we have used these functions to convert between the cookies and the object representation, and what we need to do is now that we have these serialization and these Passport functions configured, we need to now go into each one of the the functions that requests that come in, to invoke these functions, right? To let the framework know whether you're logged in or not. For instance, when we log in, right? What we want to do is have Passport take a look at the incoming requests, right? And do the verification that if this user does exist. So the way we do that is let's say Passport, you take it, right? You authenticate, right? Using the strategy I configured earlier, the local strategy. Right? You take a look at it. Pass, with the username and password coming from the request. You take a look if it's okay, right? If it's valid, then come in here and allow you to go in here and do whatever you need to do, right? So once we have that, right, we can go back to the server, right, and tell the user information will be stored in the cookie once when we log in. Also, we can now create our own another request here that says that that we can use to check to see if that user is logged in. Right. What happens is that when the strategy runs, right, and the user and password match, right, the framework stores in its cache the user representation in there, right. So, for instance, we could create here another like a get, right, that we can use real quick to see if the person is logged in. We'll say rest logged in. Is the user logged in? Just to query it, right? And what we could do here is that we can use the user that is being stored in the request by Passport and say from the request, right? We have a request response. We can say send back to the client, whether the user is authenticated or not. So Passport adds these functions into the request object and the response objects. So is authenticated, right? This checks to see in the cookie, right, whether the user has been authenticated, and if if this is true, if it's authenticated returns true, then we're going to send back the user in the request, right, deserialized back to the to the client. Or otherwise, we're going to say nope, the user doesn't exist, it's not authenticated. We're going to send back a 0, like a flag. Oops, a flag saying that we can know that this particular user is not authenticated. So back in the client, we can use these nomenclatures in the controller. Back in the controller, when when we're trying to access the profile page, we like to be able to say, well, here the profile page, we don't want to give access to the profile unless the user has successfully logged in. So what we could do is that we could put like an interceptor that looks at the request before to see if they are logged in. So we can say that yes, you'll be able to continue only if the following are true, right? You can create several predicates here and give them names, and then map them to functions. See if if they return that's true, then it allows you to navigate to that particular URL and that particular controller. So this function we can declare outside, right? Here it is, where this function can use the various services, such as the HTTP service and the location service, right? To make requests back to the server to see if the user is indeed authenticated, right? So here's a function, and we're going to use the HTTP, right? To see if that user is logged in, right? So we can do a request, right? We can say HTTP get, right? I believe we called it rest logged in, right? If it's successful, right, it's going to give us back the user as a response. And now remember that it could be an actual user object or a 0, right? So if the user is not, right, 0, or we can have that it's else, right? So if it's not a 0, we'll do something, or if it is a 0, then we're going to force them to go to the login page, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to say, right, if it is a 0, we're going to say we use the location, right, to go to the login page, right? We're going to say nope,
you're not authorized here, you first need to log in, right? We'll use the location. We need to declare the location service here. There we go. If it is successfully logged in, we're going to store that in the root scope, right? We'll say current user is the user we just logged in, right? We'll have to inject that as well. Okay. If it is 0, right, then there is no current user, right? Wait, sorry, this goes here, right? If it is different than 0, then the current user is that. Instead, here it's null, right? So the user doesn't exist. We're not successfully logged in. Now, another thing that we might want to do is that because these things are asynchronous, they're coming back, we might want to use another service called the queue service that allows us to create what are called promises that allows us to return immediately from the function, but treat various asynchronous requests as if it were one single response. So we say here for right? And this allows us to immediately return from this function down here, even though it's an asynchronous call. So we can just return the deferred. This is a very common. Let me spell this here. Okay, there we go. This is a very common design pattern to deal with multiple asynchronous calls and allowing the client to serialize them. If the user is not 0, right, then what this will do is that whenever it comes back from the server, the deferred is going to resolve and say, yes, you are allowed to continue wherever it is that you were trying to go, right? So what we're doing here is I notice that we were trying to go to profile, right? And what the resolve is going to do is says, no, first I need to check with this check logged in function down here, right? If he says it's okay, then I'll go. Otherwise, I won't, right? So, but this is asynchronous, right? I need to kind of wait on this to come back, and this is where this is resolved and says yes, indeed you can pass, you can keep going. The opposite is that we're going to reject and say nope, you're not allowed to continue wherever it is that you were trying to go. Okay. All right. So I think we'll set. We might need to restart the server. Okay. We'll say no server, and let's see now. Let's reload here. Oops. Sorry. Are we running? Module can't find mega passport. Did we not install that? Let's see. More package JSON. Apparently not. Oh yeah, yes we did. Passport local. What does it say? Passort. Oh, I must have misspelled it. Server. Passport local. There we go. Again. Server. Okay. Oops. I need to serialize. Did I misspell this as well? Yeah, I must have misspelled it. Maybe I think it's this deserialized, right? Deserialized. I can't spell today. So it's where are you? Where are you? Deserialized. Deserialized. There we go. Okay, let's try again. Okay, it's okay. Let's reload this. All right, so there we go. So if we try to go the profile, notice that it doesn't let us. See that it's making all these requests every time to see if you're logged in, and it's returning 0, right? Because we're not logged in, right? And it's using the cookie that is stored in the header. So you see that it has a cookie. So this cookie was set right by the Passport framework. So if we instead use Dan here and say login, it comes back with let me see what happened here. Login, mongoose error. Okay, so it looks like cas error, error, blah, blah, cas error, mongoose server 35, something won't run. 35, 1, username. Oh, okay, so passport. Oh, what? Passport. Oh, can't spell it right. Password. There we go. Okay. Doing this again. This is clear here. And again, there we go. We were able to go into the profile page once we have logged in. Right. If we restart the server and try to log in with someone who doesn't exist, okay, we go. Notice we can't navigate to the profile page. If we try to log in with something gibberish, click on login. Notice that we are denied. It says unauthorized. See that? It comes back with 4.1 unauthorized. Only if we log in with an existing user, such as Dan, we say login, then we can go to the profile page. So we can go home or go back to the profile page. And notice that the information is still there.